Eskerrik asko, Nora y Aitor, por traernos la experiencia de Osalan. Y come, please, the presenters, come to the stage so that we can open up a time for discussion. Vamos a abrir un espacio de 20 minutos para poder hacer preguntas. Tenemos, como sabéis, traducciones, o sea que podéis hacer las preguntas en euskera, en castellano o en inglés. Levantar la mano y se os acercará un micrófono. Y por favor, presentaros, decir de quiénes sois y de dónde venís. Abrimos el espacio de preguntas. ¿Alguna pregunta? ¿Nadie tiene ninguna pregunta? Bueno, pues voy a empezar yo con una pregunta. ¿Sí? Dr. Suneman, yes? Of course. Please, go ahead.
Interesting observations with regards to the sign system has always been that sign doesn't provide an overall assessment of the certainty of the evidence. Nora, I'm not sure, maybe I missed that. I didn't see you mention that. That was one of the big reasons why sign said we need to stop doing what we are doing, because they were only assessing single studies and never provided an approach that would say, here's the 10 studies that answer my question. What is the overall certainty that I have in it?
No, que no lo he dicho, pero sí es verdad. O sea, de hecho, sí que aparece, creo, bueno, en las plantillas que se utilizaban para hacer las formulaciones de las recomendaciones, pero sí que no se valora como grade de lo que es la calidad global de la evidencia. Y de hecho, el mismo SAIN usa grade. O sea, tampoco lo he dicho, que SAIN se pasó a grade, con lo cual tampoco tenía mucho sentido seguir haciendo las guías y los protocolos con SAIN. Había que cambiar.
Paul ha presentado diferentes organizaciones internacionales que utilizan métodos sistemáticos o revisiones sistemáticas para hacer sus recomendaciones. Me preguntaba cómo es la situación a nivel del Estado español o a nivel nacional en España, cómo en Environmental Occupational Health, o sea, cómo se ha implementado esto, si se ha implementado. Vosotros habéis dicho que habéis empezado a hacer estos trabajos en ámbitos de decisión, cómo se está aceptando o no, o qué nivel de implementación tiene este método.
Bueno, yo creo que el nivel de implementación a día de hoy es muy pequeño todavía. Yo creo que quienes tienen que emitir las recomendaciones, y en gran parte las propias administraciones que son las que están comprometidas o concernidas en todo esto, pues aún no se han puesto a trabajar de esta manera, ¿no? Entonces, yo creo que es necesario poco a poco que cuando se van emitiendo recomendaciones por parte de los diferentes institutos, de los diferentes organismos, vayan tomando conciencia de que a día de hoy, con todo lo que se publica, con la variedad enorme de resultados que se pueden ir viendo, etcétera, no hay manera de poder disponer de toda la información y es necesario pues bueno, utilizar ya métodos que nos ayuden pues eso, a poder hacer una síntesis de aquello que queremos saber y buscar lo mejor que podamos, porque si no, no se va a poder. Entonces, el nivel de implementación yo creo que es pequeño. Nosotros, el primer intento, digamos, un poco ha sido a través un poco de los protocolos, pero yo entiendo que esto no se puede quedar solamente en el ámbito sanitario y solamente a nivel de protocolos, sino que debiera de ampliarse mucho más también a todo lo que tiene que ver con el campo de la higiene industrial y con las intervenciones que se suelen recomendar por parte de los servicios de prevención a la hora de dar recomendaciones que puedan ser eficaces y, a ser posible, recomendaciones que sean probadas, que son útiles, ¿no? Entonces, esto es lo que hay que trabajar. Y igual lo que nos podemos encontrar es que no hay nada, con lo cual al menos sabremos qué es lo que no sabemos, pues para poder dar una buena recomendación. Y luego, claro, todos aquellos que se dedican pues eso, a hablar un poco de lo que es exposición, efecto, etcétera, pues que todo esto, lo mismo que niveles de exposición a los que se pueden aparecer los daños y tal, pues yo creo que poco a poco irán adoptando este tipo de técnicas, pues porque si no, no va a tener la credibilidad suficiente aquello que se dice.
¿Hay alguna pregunta? ¿Alguien se anima? Tengo yo el micro. Paul, I wonder, so we are now doing a training with an institution in occupational health, and we were super lucky having the PECO publication, because we just started last month with this course. So it was very helpful for us to adapt this framework to their own topic, and yes, very, very helpful. I wonder, because as an editor, how many of the protocols that you currently receive follows more or less, or are good enough, or I mean, how good or bad, how consistent are with this PECO framework, the 5 options? So whether many of them are rejected, or for this reason, because the PECO question haven't been frameworked or drafted properly.
Yeah, so we don't receive a huge number of protocols, which is one of the reasons why so many published systematic reviews, I think, in environmental health are of such poor quality. We've only just started receiving protocols in the journal, even though we've been suggesting to authors that they submit for 2 years. It's really only in the last 12 months that people have started submitting protocols. We had our first non-WHO protocol submitted 3 months ago, and our second one submitted 1 month ago. And it's not usually until someone has had their systematic review rejected for obvious reasons that they then realise that they should have done a protocol in the first place. So I think we'll start seeing a large uptick in protocol submission over the next sort of year or so, I think, maybe 2 years. Ideally, we would be in a position where we could reject a systematic review if it didn't have a pre-published protocol. So Cochrane won't publish a systematic review without a protocol, but we aren't the same kind of vertically integrated evidence organisation that Cochrane are. We're just a journal, so we can't control what researchers do. We have to some extent respond to what's culturally normal and just try and shift cultural practice, and then once cultural practices move far enough, we can then impose a standard. The protocols we receive are generally PICO compliant. I think it's because if the authors understand that PICO statements, understand that a protocol is important, they probably already also understand that a PICO formulation is important, because they'll be working off the same kind of set of standards that most systematic reviewers who do good systematic reviews would be using. So they'd be using Cochrane, Prisma, obviously Grade, probably following the navigation guide or NTP OHAT approaches, and they're all have required PICO statements, and the PICO formulation is a requirement of the journal. So if they read our submission requirements, they'll see that as well. So they're usually okay at that point.
Okay, thank you. Yes?
Quería preguntaros, en el tema de, claro, yo porque trabajo con guías de práctica clínica y ahí la mayoría, casi siempre los estudios son en humanos, ¿no? Entonces, cuando empezamos a trabajar el tema de la exposición al ruido, las interacciones con los químicos, claro, se incluyen lo que son los estudios en animales y los estudios in vitro y todo esto, ¿no? Entonces, para mí es como, no es un mundo nuevo, pero bueno, es algo que en las guías de práctica clínica no hacemos. Entonces, ¿cómo está trabajando Grey con todo esto? ¿Tenéis previsto publicar en breve o estáis en la discusión o cómo?
So I think that depends. So first of all, yes, that's something that we've tried to work on for a few years now. But I guess there are a few different aspects with regards to, in particular, animal research. And again, it depends on what you're using animal research for. So in the field of toxicology, for instance, you often have randomized controlled trials and of animals, and that may present relatively good evidence. That may even trump human evidence. But the point is that if specifically about animal evidence, we basically look at animals in the great context as just another species, and it creating primarily issues around indirectness. And so that evidence can be either utilized to support certain conclusions, it can be the best evidence for a particular question. But once again, it primarily creates issues around indirectness. But there is more to. We've had a number of workshops actually, and have discussed it in many instances that other type of evidence typically provides support for judgments about directness. And the very first time we utilized in vitro evidence as well as animal evidence was when 13 years ago, we developed guidance for the treatment of avian influenza. And what we did at that time is we reviewed, it's an interesting example that can be, I think, easily related to the occupational health field. So what we were facing at that time was that people had fallen sick, not too many, it was not pandemic, but people had fallen sick after infection with avian influenza. There were these typical cases, obviously in low and middle income countries, in particular in Asia. And we were developing with WHO guidance of whether or not to use pharmacological treatment to treat these type of patients. So our systematic reviews were broad. They included, as I said, in vitro evidence, they included animal studies and so on. And the way that we utilized it is by informing our judgments about indirectness, because all of the evidence was coming from studies that had been done in seasonal influenza, and what we were trying to find out was whether or not the potential medications had similar mechanisms of action in avian influenza, so in the H5N1 virus. And we felt that the in vitro evidence and animal evidence could help us make judgments about how indirect the evidence is and whether or not to use it at all. And so, for instance, we found that the receptors were similar, that the mechanisms of action in vitro was similar for H1N1 and H5N1, and utilized that type, once again, based on a systematic review, that type of evidence to inform our indirectness judgments. And I think that's how this framework, this evidence integration framework will evolve, judgments about indirectness.
Bueno, si no hay más preguntas, vamos a terminar aquí la fase de las preguntas. Pero como os hemos introducido al principio, tenemos un workshop pequeñito para ver, bueno, los estándares para las publicaciones de las revisiones sistemáticas que nos ha presentado Paul. Ahora mismo están repartiendo una información, le voy a acompañar a repartir. Entendemos que ha sido largo esta sesión, entonces queremos repartiros la información y si queréis ir al baño, tomaros un pequeño descanso, pero os invitamos a que volváis para que podamos seguir con el workshop. Le paso la palabra a Paul.
Right, so just to explain the exercise, you get to pretend to do my job for me for a bit, where what you have in your hand is you have a systematic review, which has been conducted, which is the kind of thing that we would typically receive at our journal, and you have the editorial triage tool that we use for deciding whether or not that systematic review should be peer-reviewed. So you basically get insight into our internal processes of the journal, the exact questions that we ask that we ask when we're looking at a systematic review and deciding whether or not it should be peer-reviewed. This will give you, that's exactly the same tool that we're presenting to you now, essentially. So if you come back after the little break, then we can take you through how we would critically appraise a systematic review, and it will help you, if you were submitting to our journal, that's exactly the process that we would use, so you can use that critical appraisal tool for making sure that you meet our standard. But in general, if you are planning a systematic review project, you can use this tool for at least shaping how it is you go about conducting a systematic review and understanding how editors might respond when they're making a decision about peer reviewing it or not.